Now I'm glad to introduce the next speaker, Caucher Birkar from Cambridge. Caucher Birkar moved from war-torn Iran to Britain in his childhood, and he was educated in Britain. Apparently he did very well there because as a student he got a fellowship of London Math Society as the most promising student. He fulfilled the promise and got Fields Medal last year in Rio de Janeiro. Wikipedia says that Caucher Birkar means migrant mathematician. In that sense, I am also Caucher Birkar, as are many people in this room. Please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. So I will, as the title of my talk suggests, I will talk more about my personal life and also the education journey. One reason for this is that last year I gave a talk here also, and it was all about mathematics and nothing else. This time I wanted to do something a little bit different, to make it a bit more maybe entertaining. But also on the way I'm hoping to tell you a few things, especially for the young people, how I did mathematics and how I approached mathematics, how I thought about mathematics, and some of the challenges I faced, and maybe you can find some advice there, some tips for your own journey. So I was born in a city called Mariwan, although officially it's called Marivan. It's actually not really correct. It should be Mariwan, in Kurdistan on the border of Iran and Iraq. You can actually even walk to the border, just would take you maybe 1 hour or something like that. So we were very close, and the region I lived in is, it has a lot of mountains, so it has a climate in a sense a bit similar to Europe. It's not very dry, it's actually quite green, but we have 4 seasons, so each season is quite different from the others. Here you see some pictures of the city and then nearby surrounding of the city. I was born in a village just opposite the city, not inside the city itself. So as many of you know, Kurdish people live in the Middle East, and our region is divided into 4 countries: Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. And we have had lots of problems, especially in the last 100 years. We have been in really terrible shape until quite recently. Just even last year, there were Kurdish cities being destroyed, just really for not good reasons, just almost artificial reasons. So life has been very difficult for us, especially because there are 4 countries, not just one. We have to deal with 4 different countries, and they are all, actually they all don't like each other, but except on the issue of the Kurds. When it comes to this issue, they all unite and make life even more difficult for us. Anyway, so when I was a few months old, there was a revolution in Iran, and even before that it was a bit chaotic. And then a few months after I was born, there was a revolution, so the whole government changed and everything changed. And when I was about 2 years old, then the Iran-Iraq war started, which lasted for 8 years. And since we were living on the border, we were just trapped in the middle of the war. There was no way to really escape. Most of the threat was aerial. Fortunately, in my region, my city, there was never land invasion. It was always aerial. And it was quite often you see airplanes coming and dropping bombs, and especially when I was in primary school. So these 8 years covered all my primary school years, and very often we were in classrooms, and then instead of after the lecture going to have some fun, in the middle of the lecture the airplanes would come and we would just run out. I mean, the only thing we knew to do was run to the mountains. So we did that very, very often. And when there is a war disrupts everything, including education. Although there were schools, but as you can imagine, in such an environment, schools can't be really very good. And the school that I started to study, it was just a normal house and turned into a school. There were like 3 rooms and with a lot of children, so as you can imagine, the conditions were not very great. But still, I'm very grateful to those teachers who, in that kind of environment, that kind of circumstances, they didn't give up on teaching us. So I'm really grateful to them. And the war, of course, poses a lot of dangers, also indirectly, not just the bombing, but also indirectly. So, for example, one of the things that we did very often as children were playing with explosives, because you could find them everywhere, especially small ones like bullets. If you just walked around 2-3 minutes, you would find some bullets. And we made it even more dangerous by making a fire and then putting these bullets into the fire. And what we did was we dig some holes around the fire. When we put the bullet in them, and we would just jump into the holes. And see what happens. The bullets were just flying everywhere. But it's really amazing that no one got hurt playing all these games. I mean, there were other people injured or even killed later on, but at least at that time, all these plays actually didn't lead to anyone's death or even injury. My ancestors were aristocrats. We used to have a lot of land in the area, and I think they enjoyed life. They had a good life. But unfortunately, sometime before I was born, we basically lost all of these privileges, because the government at some point decided to redistribute the land. And they did it in a quite funny way. They invited all the aristocrats in the region, the king of the time, there was a kingdom at the time, and then he said we will have like a festival, and said you all come to have fun. And then they put all of them in prison. Some of them, they never returned. We never know what happened to them. Like my great-grandfather never returned. We never know what happened to him. Suppose he died at some point. So we lost the power, but we still had some pieces of land, and we continued to do farmers. So by my time, we were just simple peasants. We didn't really have privileges. But since my ancestors, they enjoyed themselves, the local people actually didn't like us very much, because they thought that we come from the same line of people who didn't treat them very well. So they tried to revenge on us sometime, and also make life a bit difficult. Anyway, so my parents were doing farming, and I also did farming, as all my brothers and sisters in the family. We spent a lot of time farming until I finished undergraduate. That was basically normal life. Whenever there was farming in spring and summer, we did, even the day before examinations, we would still do farming. But fortunately, my father, he took education very seriously, and he thought that that's the only way to go ahead. Farming is not the future for us. We have to study, and we have to get degrees and do some other kind of jobs. But also education, in a sense, also had value, not just for getting a job, but just to know. Knowledge also was appreciated. So that was lucky for me that they just gave us the idea that that's the only way to go. You should not think about anything else, education. And so we all attended school, And we tried to do our best. In fact, my father, even before I became 6, which was the official age to go to school, he took me just informally to school, to the local school, and he even himself came to sit with me, just to make me feel good with the school. Because some children, even now, when they go to school for the first time, they are really afraid. But he just wanted to eliminate that and make me feel good so that later on I will study better. But for the first time that I felt any special connection with mathematics was when I was in grade 5. I remember that once we had an exam and I did very well, but I didn't actually study very well. And I was a bit surprised how I got a very good mark, almost 100, without spending too much time doing mathematics. So I think that's the first time that it attracted my attention in a special way. Because I tried generally to do good in all the courses, but this one somehow made an impression on me. But also, luckily, in that year we had a really good school, a really good teacher. Unlike maybe especially the grade 4, where we had a teacher who used to beat us really very, very often. So maybe this is not very familiar to you, but at that time beating was very common in schools. So the teachers could beat us. And when I was in grade 4, the only thing I remember from that year is that the teacher was beating us so badly. But fortunately, this guy in grade 5, he did not even have a diploma. So basically he had himself partial education, but just naturally he was a really very peaceful and kind person, and also he was creative in the way he approached teaching. For example, he would take us outside to the nature, especially in spring, which is very beautiful, and he would just teach there, like for 1 and 2 hours. So that made a lot of difference. It's much better than just sitting in a classroom all the time. And he also organized competitions with nearby schools, even in other villages. We would go somewhere in the nature and we would start to compete, and I usually, in that year, I was responsible for the mathematics section of the competitions. So that was all good. But what made the biggest difference was my older brother. He was himself interested in engineering and science in general, but I have no idea where he got these ideas, because there wasn't really, I mean, there were schools, textbooks and so on, but the way he approached learning and education was completely different from everyone else in the region, not only in our family. He was extremely creative. He would always try to invent things, design things, build things, the kind of thing that no one else would even think about. So as one example, for example, at some point he was printing himself. There was no printing machine except in official places, but he just invented printing by his own. He carved out some plastic sheets, all the letters, and then he could actually print out things. And people would think that this is an official letter from some government agency. Yeah. And some of the other things he did, like he built a projector, he even made animation for it, and he would show us, all the children in the neighborhood, his animation, his movie. So he was really extremely creative, and that was great for me to have someone like that next to me, just to follow as an example. Even if he didn't try to teach me, still to have someone like you, like that in your family, in your neighborhood, is really can make an extremely big difference. But at some point he also tried to teach me a bit more advanced mathematics and also physics, for example, calculus. So that was when I was about maybe 11 years old. But other children would learn that 4 years, maybe 4 years later. So I learned that much earlier, 4 or 5 years earlier. And then, but also what was important about his approach was that he didn't teach me so that I get a good grade. He just saw that learning these things is just really exciting. Just you learn it for the sake of learning or for inventing something, not just to be good in school. That was really also, it made a really big difference on my approach to education and to learning. So if you ask me who is the most influential person in your education, I think this is the guy. So he maybe started all these things. And not surprisingly, all the people in my family, my siblings, they all ended up to be engineers except me, who took the wrong path. Anyway, so by the time I got to high school, my brother was already in university, so we were separate. But I just followed this line of mathematics and also up to some extent physics. But at some point I realized that the reason I like those physical things is actually because of the mathematics. So at some point I just, in a way, forgot about the physics and just concentrated on the mathematics in really like high concentration. And there were a few things about mathematics that I really liked. One of those things is that mathematics is very precise. There is no arguments and fighting and things. Once you prove something and your colleagues verify it, then it's proved, and there is no argument. It's not like philosophy or literature or politics and that kind of subject. So even in physics you have like different theories. It's not always the same theory. But mathematics, just once, everything is precise, and I really like that. And also in mathematics, when you establish something, it stays there forever. Whatever people proved 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, is still correct, is still there, and it's not going to disappear. Again, if you compare to physics 200 years ago and now, it's completely different. Computer science is even much, much faster. Even if you don't, if there is a program that you used 50 years ago, even if it's still correct, but you just don't use it anymore. You just replace it by something else. But mathematics is kind of immortal. It just stays there forever. And then mathematics is also beautiful. All the things that I try to learn, I found them just to be really, there's some kind of beauty in it, which I think brings mathematics very close to ours. But it's just the beauty is a little bit different. You need a special language to understand its beauty. It's like poetry. If someone reads a Chinese poetry to you, and if you don't know Chinese language, then there is no way you can appreciate that poetry. I mean, you can translate, but much of the beauty is lost in the translation. It's the same with mathematics. You need the language, you need the background to appreciate this beauty, to see the beauty. And, but fortunately, I went into mathematics enough to see this beauty already in high school. But it's not all just about beauty. I thought that it's also exciting to do mathematics. There is a joy in doing mathematics. When you solve a problem, there is some kind of joy in that. And I think in that sense, mathematics is a bit similar to sports. When you play football, maybe you don't care so much about the beauty of the game, but you just feel that there is some kind of joy, some kind of enjoyment in playing football, some kind of excitement. And I think for me, when I do research, a lot of it has to do with, so when I learn things from other people, yeah, I appreciate the beauty. But when I do mathematics myself, it's more this fun and excitement, which is similar to sport. And finally, mathematics is also useful. So that was maybe one other reason that attracted me to mathematics is, yeah, we have pure and applied math, but quite often pure math also ends up to be applicable to some world problems. Anyway, but the problem for me was in high school that I was totally isolated. There was not one single person to ask, what should I do? What should I read? How should I approach mathematics? There was no internet at the time. There were no computers where I lived. And until I entered university, I lived in my hometown and I left only twice to go to a nearby city. And there also I couldn't find many people, but I could at least buy some books. So it was total isolation. Then I had to decide all by myself what to do, what I should read, and how I should think about mathematics. That can be maybe, that makes life very difficult and maybe doesn't work for everyone. But I think maybe that was good for me. Just this isolation taught me how to be independent, how to learn things by myself and not rely on school and teachers and lectures. And this experience proved to be extremely useful in later years when I entered university, when I did PhD and so on. So fortunately the local library for some mysterious reason had really excellent mathematics books, and if you, at least at the time when I read those books, there was a log of people who took this book from the library, and almost all of them were taken just by me or by me and maybe someone else by mistake. So I don't know why they put these books in the library, but that happened to be a very good coincidence for me. So I read a lot of these books, and I still remember some of those books, which are also famous in the West. For example, there is a book about the life of mathematicians. It's called Men of Mathematics. It's just the biography of especially older generation mathematics, all the way from Euclid and from the Greeks until 19th and early 20th century. Just reading the life of these people, that they spend most of their time discovering things, it just felt to me it was really so exciting. I couldn't see any other way of living, basically. I couldn't imagine going to work in a shop or something like that. I thought that this is really the way I should also be. And there were also lots of books. For example, this book by Courant and Robbins is called What's Mathematics. It's a quite big book. And in this book you find introduction to many parts of mathematics, like algebra, number theory, geometry, topology, and all kind of things. So this is much more advanced than high school. And by reading all these books, especially books like this, then I got acquainted with many ideas from modern mathematics, and that proved to be very useful in later years when I entered university. So at that time I liked more the geometric side of the mathematics, especially classical geometry like projective geometry, but also topology. Already, for example, in this book about analysis, you see metric spaces and a lot of topology. But also in this book about this was mathematics, there is also a section about topology, and for example you learn about Euler number, Euler characteristic, and these topological spaces. And I just found those things to be really very nice and very beautiful. But so in a way this is one of the points, maybe I can put it as an advice. You have to go outside school system, you have to go outside university system to really learn something deep. If you only stick to your lecture notes, then, well, you can still succeed, I suppose, but if you really want to be successful, you have to go out. If you like a subject already, for example, if you are undergraduate, if you like, in mathematics, suppose that you like algebra, then there is no reason why you should not go and pick up some books about algebra and read them. Just the algebra books in undergraduate are not enough. You can just, if you like a topic, just follow that topic. Yeah, try to do your best in your exams and lectures, but also you have to really go out of the box. So I learned that in high school, and that was really amazing. But also already in high school, I thought that just reading mathematics is not enough. Yes, there is beauty and so on there, but if I don't do it myself, then I just don't get the satisfaction that I want. Again, it is similar to, let's say, football. If you just go and watch football, then yes, you can enjoy, but when you play yourself, it's actually much more enjoyable. You get a lot more by doing it yourself. So I try to also do research, and I guess I proved certain things, maybe not important at all, but that's not the point. The point is just try to do research, just try to prove something new. This can be done already in high school, but in undergraduate, definitely it can be done. It doesn't have to be very important, you don't have to publish it, but just that experience of trying to do something new will be amazingly useful later when you do a PhD. In this age, I mean, in many universities, I think they also, for example, in Cambridge, they encourage this, at least to pick up a topic, learn about it, and if you can prove something new, great. If not, that's not the end of the world. So maybe that's another important piece of advice. Anyway, when I was about 15 or 16, I decided to be a mathematician. That's it. At that point, I decided my life, basically. And I think that was really great, just to have a direction, precise direction of what you want to do with your life. I think the earlier, maybe, the better. Unless if you pick the wrong. The wrong thing. I mean, if you want to, yeah, I mean, at that age, of course, you never know what people do. If they decide to play video games for the rest of their lives, obviously that's not a good idea. But I think if anyone in high school decide to be a mathematician, a physicist, a computer scientist, an artist, or whatever, I think they would not regret it. That's my feeling. I mean, if they are genuinely passionate about whatever subject. Anyway, the lectures at the school were not really so much useful to me. So at the last year, the final year of high school, I just dropped out of the school. There was a parallel system where you could just go at the end of the year, take the exams. You didn't have to attend lectures and things like that also worked for me. Probably I should have done it much earlier. Anyway, I entered University of Tehran to do undergraduate in pure mathematics, and for the first time I met actual mathematicians, people who actually wrote articles and published it. Before that I had never seen even one. But there I saw people actually doing mathematics, but also there was a much, much better library than what I had in my home city. So the environment obviously was much better. I was not totally isolated. Again, although in a way I was, you could say, isolated, because the way I approached mathematics was quite different from all my classmates, because I just continued my line from high school. The way I did mathematics in high school, I just continued the same way in university. So we come again to the same point that you have to pick a topic. You have to pick something that you are passionate about and just follow it. And you don't have to follow it forever. So when I was first year undergraduate, I just picked a book about algebraic topology. And I learned a lot of things about algebraic topology, like fundamental groups, homology theory, and so on. I didn't become a topologist, but I never regret that I read these books in first year undergraduate. It had nothing to do with exams, with lectures, because the first topology course we had was 4 years later. So this was just on my own that I was interested in topology, and that's it. Especially here I saw this interaction between algebra on one side and topology on the other side, and that was really exciting. And later I come back to a similar point. In the second year, I picked up some books about commutative algebra. and I just felt that I like this topic, commutative algebra, and just read a lot about it. So this book, for example, here you see is one of the standard textbooks of graduate courses in commutative algebra. And in fact, that year I met a guy who was doing a master in mathematics, in pure mathematics, and we talked a little. His specialty was commutative algebra. We talked a little bit, and he was amazed that almost everything he learned in his lectures I already knew. And then I told him that it was just for fun. I liked the topic, and then I read about it. But in the third year, I had the same person happen to be my roommate, and he was reading a book all the time. He was by his side, sometimes very excited, sometimes annoyed and angry. And then I got curious, what is in this book that he's so much into this book, all the time reading the book. And it happened to be this book of Shafarevich about algebraic geometry. It's one of the basic graduate level courses in algebraic geometry. I got also interested and just picked up the book and started to read. I realized that a lot of those things that I learned in commutative algebra actually all came from algebraic geometry, much of it. Here you have not only the algebra but also the geometry. And there is basically a dictionary between algebra, commutative algebra, and geometry. Whatever you say in one side can be translated into the other side, and vice versa. So that was really amazing. I mean, this connection between algebra and geometry was, in a sense, more profound than in the algebraic topology case. Here, the connection was much more stronger, and I just got hooked, and I never left this field. So I have been doing algebraic geometry for the last 20-something years. And it all started here with this book. But in the fourth year, I also tried to read a bit more advanced algebraic geometry, especially this standard and scary book of Hartshorne about algebraic geometry. This is written in a more modern language of schemes, not in a classical language. It follows the style, the school of Alexander Grothendieck. I couldn't understand much here. I mean, that's the impression most students have when they read this book. That it's very abstract. There is some geometry there, but actually it's very hard to see the intuition. But I was lucky again because I had read the classical version of algebraic geometry first. When I arrived here, I had a lot of at least intuition from the classical side of the theory. But Grothendieck also happened to be a really great source of inspiration for me. Both his school of mathematics was somehow very appealing to me, but also his life and his personality. So many of you, I guess, already know that he was basically a stateless person living in France for a very long time. And I don't know if finally he got citizenship in France or not, but at least when he was active, he actually was a stateless person. At least to me, I think he should be, I mean, if you pick 2, 3 mathematicians in all history, I would put this guy maybe on the top. Anyway, in the year 2000, I moved to the UK. And the first year I couldn't study. I was there basically as a refugee, but fortunately it all was sorted out in 1 year. For many other people it takes much longer, can take 10 years, but I was lucky, I think, that I just spent 1 year dealing with immigration and so on. And in 2001 I started to do a PhD course in Nottingham University, advised by Ivan Festenko, a number theorist. But I had already decided to be an algebraic geometrician, and there was no algebraic geometry in this department, in this university. So Ivan was very helpful, very supportive. He comes from this Russian school of mathematics where they learn a great deal of mathematics in basically every subject. so they are not narrow. He knew a lot of algebraic geometry, but still, to do research in algebraic geometry, you need someone professionally algebraic geometry. So in the first year, just after a few months, I went to the Newton Institute in Cambridge. There was a program about algebraic geometry, especially birational geometry, for 5 months, and I just went to stay there. In fact, the organizer told me, you cannot come to attend this thing, but Ivan insisted a lot, sent them a lot of emails. They finally agreed I go there without any support. So I went there, rented a room on my own, and just attended the seminar. So maybe that's another piece of advice. Don't stay all the time where you study. Travel. You can go to other places. You can, not just for workshops and conferences, you can visit other places for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months. You are not going to lose anything. You will just meet other people, and that can be, first of all, you learn a lot of stuff from other people, but also when you apply for jobs, you need someone to write letters for you. If you spend all your time in your own institution, you can only ask your advisor and no one else. But if you visit other people, they will be happy to write letters for you. So anyway, I went to Cambridge. At the end of this program, I met Slava Shakurov, another Russian mathematician. But this guy now was a proper algebraic geometer, and he agreed to be my second PhD advisor. In fact, in the first 2 years, I picked up some very difficult problems. They are still open, not solved, and not surprisingly, I couldn't prove much about those things, and I did all the thing about my PhD basically in the 3rd year with help of Shakurov. In 2004, I finished PhD, moved to Cambridge after a short stay in Warwick, and again, during actually the PhD, I spent also 5 months in Johns Hopkins University. I spent 2 months in Moscow State University. So you see, in total, I have been away for more than a year during my PhD study. So I really can't emphasize this point enough, that you better get out and travel as much as you can. And let me also say a few things generally about mathematicians. Life as a mathematician, I think maybe more generally as an academic, usually consists of doing 3 things. Research, so at least in top universities, that's number 1, teaching, and also there is service. So you have to make time for all these activities. And I'm afraid to tell you, the older you get, the more senior you get, the less time you will have. The more responsibilities you will have. Because you get more things to do. You will have family responsibilities. You will have a lot more things to worry about. So the PhD time is actually the freest time of your life, probably. And also, to be a successful mathematician, you need a lot of qualities. You need a strong internal motivation. That's the only way that can sustain you for a long time to do hard work. But that applies to any other subject. You have to concentrate really very highly. And then you have to be very patient, because it doesn't go well all the time. Sometimes it goes wrong. Sometimes you work for months, for a year, for 2 years. In the end, you can't show anything for it, because you couldn't prove what you were trying to prove. At least in chemistry, if you have some idea, you test something, at least you can say, I tried it and it didn't work. But you can't do that in mathematics. You can't say, I tried it and it didn't work. And you have to manage your time very well, because mathematicians are usually, we don't have a lab. So other people can't tell you what to do. You have to decide on your own how to use your time, how to manage everything. So in reality, we do 2 jobs. We are mathematicians, but we are also managers. We have to manage our own life and our research. In the last couple of minutes, let me also tell you a bit more outside mathematics. So in my case, I think being a Kurd, the Kurdish culture helped me a lot in my life. in so many ways. For example, during the war, in all those really extremely difficult times, the culture helped us to survive. You could see people all the time joking and just mentally to be happy. That's extremely important. I think it's really relevant for this day also, even if there is no war. For example, I can claim that people in my village in the wartime were more happy than people now in Cambridge. It's just, there is material and there is mental activity. These are, I think, different. Of course, they are related, but they are different. To be happy, just psychologists can't make you happy. You need culture to be happy. You need social life, but these all are in the context of culture. So sometimes in general, I'm interested in psychology, as some of my people in my family. And I get quite annoyed when I see these solutions of when people have depression or whatever, just, I don't know, deep breath and I do this and that. That's not going to work. You need people around you to support you. You need a culture. You need a social structure. So that's why I am a great supporter of cultures. Honestly, I don't care about countries. What I like are cultures. Those should survive because it's important for the survival of humanity in the long term. Diversity of cultures is like diversity in biology. So for ecosystem to survive, you need biodiversity. I think for humans to survive, you need diversity of cultures. I really hate to live in a world where everyone speaks the same language, everyone eats the same food, everyone wears the same dress. It's just extremely boring. One reason I like mathematics is because of its diversity. There are so many ideas of different kinds. I like music because I think of its diversity. There are so many types of music, so many ways you can enjoy it, and I think it's the same with culture and the human life. So that's why I try to teach my kid, a son called Kurdish. He learned Kurdish, who now he speaks fluently, from only one person, because there is no other Kurdish speaking person in the neighborhood. So he learned it from just one person. So that also proves another point, that you can teach a language by just your own. Okay, I will stop here.